Good morning, everybody. Sorry for my perpetually clogged up thing. I unwind that every single day, and it's only 8 o'clock, and now it's still messed up again. So sorry about that. So I want to talk about a pretty deep topic, it's almost like I find myself doing this in bits and pieces. In every single session that I do with people over the last 11 years, but I've never taken the time to talk out a whole thing. So for everybody joining, thank you for coming. I don't know what time it is for you, but it's early for me, early-ish, 8 o'clock. And the day's getting going, so if you're ahead of me, good morning. If you're really ahead of me, like in tomorrow, I guess it would be, evening-ish for some people. So hello to you too. So how we are all wired up in this. So I'm just going to talk about my experiences and then weave in other clients' experiences that I've been so grateful to learn from, because every single person that I've worked with has helped the next person for sure. So my first memory of diet culture and how it infects people is I was 8 and I was school clothes shopping, or jean shopping actually. It was my mom, my grandma, and my sister. And I remember my grandmother saying, "Oh gosh," so my sister, her hips and her butt are so tiny. And she was like 6. I was 8, and I remember thinking, again, I was a small kid as well, but I guess the particular way my sisters put together was a source of, projection for my grandmother. And my grandmother was a chronic dieter. She did a lot of fad diets, up and down weight. She never got really that thin, but she would, lose 20 pounds and then gain 30 back, and this went on. She's in her 80s now, and still, struggles with not liking her body, even though, she's 87. But, so I remember this, and I instantly felt shame, like, oh my gosh, instantly thought, like, I'm not good enough just because of that comment. And it wasn't something that I did anything about, or that I felt like, I would know how to do anything about, but I just remember thinking, oh, like, there's a better body to have, and it's smaller, and it's not exactly me. So, filed away, of course, in my 8-year-old brain. And then I think that as time went by, I noticed more and more how, my mom would hide the Slim Fast powder, and she'd go on and off of that diet many different times. And I think she tried to hide her dieting, but she couldn't hide, honestly, how she felt about herself, which is didn't love herself and didn't like her body and didn't like how she looked. And I remember that was really hurtful, and it made me mad too. So, again, these are all memories of like being 10, 11, whatever. And then, of course, and by the way, my other really strong influence was my grandmother, who, again, was always dieting. And I remember around the same time of her, the cabbage soup diet, I remember her going on. And it was, again, 7, 8, 9, her doing this on and off. And she would sit at the table so miserable, while we all ate like our delicious spaghetti meatball dinners and our bread and our cake afterwards and those kind of things. And just remember, how miserable she was, and I didn't know she was sick or what was wrong with her, but I felt like I didn't really truly get it, but I also knew that she wasn't happy with herself. So again, I had all these equations around like, controlling food and being unhappy. So I look back and I see how this can set the stage, pretty easily for people. And of course there was always, fat phobic talk. And for my family, it really wasn't about, it's interesting, it wasn't about looks as much, even though it wasn't always overt. It was really about control and discipline and how much willpower you had. That was the bigger theme running through my family's life was, you're as valuable you're only as valuable as hard as you work. So, and my family's pretty well known to work and help everybody, and 7 days a week kind of thing. Very compulsive. And I know, obviously, for most of us, when we're, and this is something to look out for as you're in your letting go of diet and your recovery, is that it can easily switch to something else unless you're doing the work on that simultaneously. And that's what happened for me. I know I'm skipping around, but how this kind of stuff runs together and threads together with, puritanism and workaholism, and showing your goodness and your worth is through how hard you can work and how much you can push yourself and how much you don't need things and how much you don't want things. And that just got expressed, at least through my family, through the body. And that is the thread that comes through, I see in so many of us. So those are my earliest memories of the body was something to demonstrate your goodness and how hard you work and how much or little you needed. And there's a lot of pride in that. So, and I'm going to talk about how I got out of that, but we'll get there. And just keep moving forward. And so, as we all go through those, puberty and high school years, and how you're not going to get away from it. So if you've got that in your own family, and then you exponential that times whatever experiences you have growing up during those years when your body's changing and you're in these middle weird times where you're not quite an adult and you're not quite a kid. And then you add on top of that any kind of stressors from home, and then whatever stressors you might have income-wise, or whatever other, I guess not labels, but other experience you're having around standard of living and your color and your gender and all these other things that make things so much more difficult if you're not the ideal, which is thin and white and have a little bit more income. Then you're probably going to feel more of the suffering of not enoughness. And so something that was really, really hard for me was picking up on all that and trying to know how to juggle. Okay, I have all this internalized, fat prejudice, honestly, from my family, and they got it from diet culture, which has been around for 150-something years or more. And in my family, all being threaded with, worthiness and goodness by how much you can show that you can control what you need. It's almost like at least if you don't need so much, you can't get so disappointed, you can't get so hurt, and all these things that go on and on and on. So anyway, we grow up where people get criticized and judged for based on how they look, and that's supposed to mean something about you, whether it's popular, successful, whatever. And being a sensitive person and really being clued in on that without any kind of language for it and any way to deal with it, it was just tremendous. Just felt a lot of sadness and pressure about it, to be honest. And then the truth is that I didn't see it myself, but other people would tell me, and I know that's true. I knew I had privilege, but I didn't see it because of how much my own internalized self-hatred I had. But yeah, I'm a smaller person, and I'm a white person, and conventionally attractive according to the cultural standards. So it's like I was told those things, but I'd already, been since I was really young, feeling that I wasn't good enough. So I didn't see it and I couldn't feel it. So that compounded the storm of stuff that got me to the place of I want to avoid being seen. I want to avoid being out there. I want to avoid weighing more because people will hate me, but I want to avoid being who I am because people will hate me. And so you can see the perfect storm of things happening, in high school, where I started to develop an eating disorder. And I had so much shame about that because I knew that I never was a bigger person, but I was so scared of that because you were supposed to be scared of that. You're supposed to hate it. You were supposed to, because that's what I was taught. You're supposed to hate yourself because you can't control how your body really is, but you're supposed to hate what it could be. And so it's you know, that's how we learn this really core internalized stuff. That's how it becomes some of the bedrock of our neurobiology that we have to learn how to unhook and change. And so, you know, I started to go through my recovery, and I really didn't get this stuff talked about. There wasn't like this big cultural view on it. It was just like, eat more food, get your body refed, and then, you know, do some therapy about why you're stressed, and you'll be fine. And that'll help some. And I really had to learn things the hard way, to be honest. Like, how do I learn this stuff? I'll just share one story. I remember that I was still in my restricting binge, over-exercising days, and I was at the grocery store. And I may have talked about this online recently. I can't remember, to be honest. But I know I've talked about it recently with some clients. Is that when I faced my, you know, fat prejudice, I was 21, 22. So this would have been like 17-ish years ago, I guess. 17, 18 years ago. And I remember being at the grocery store with my putting my stuff on the conveyor belt, and there's a woman with very similar stuff, food. So she had all kinds of, and for me, my grocery cart was always the same. Some of my diet foods, and then my binge foods. Knowing good and well, I would tell myself that I wasn't going to eat all the cookie dough and the ice cream. I wasn't going to eat those foods, you know, all at one time. But pretty much 8 or 9 times out of 10, I did. But anyway, so I was putting my stuff on the cart or on the conveyor belt, and a woman had similar stuff. She had more food because I'm pretty sure she was a good 10 to 15 years older than me, and she was also larger than me. And I remember having all my food on the belt and seeing her food in her cart, which is similar to mine, and I instantly felt myself having this, like, looking at her food like, oh my gosh, like, you know, her food's similar to mine, and, you know, she should be eating that. And I'm like, oh my God, Tracy, are you serious? And I had never caught myself in a moment like that. And it wasn't because some kind of magical thing I'd heard in a session or some kind of book. And remember, this is like very, like 2000 or 1999, I think. So there weren't a lot of books out, or I didn't have a lot of access, and I didn't know about weight prejudice or the cultural, like, we're all in this toxic stew of judging each other for the way we look. I just knew that was a wrong thing to do growing up. You don't judge people, even though everybody I knew judged people and gossip about people. And so I tried not to do it, but I'm sure I was doing it too. But I remember seeing the food in her cart. I'm like, I just judged this woman. I don't know what she's going to do with this food. I know what I'm going to do with my food, which is probably, you know, restrict with all these other foods I don't really want to, and probably binge on these other foods. I know what I'm going to do with this. I feel this wave of shame, recognizing that just totally projecting on this woman. And it was the first time I remember, like, oh my gosh, this is not who I am. I've got to change this, even if I'm the only one that I know that is thinking about things in this way. And so that was the beginning of just being able to catch a projection, catch like a whiff of my own feelings towards somebody else, knowing that it was about me. And so I was on the verge of tears. I bought my stuff. And I think I know I didn't binge that day. I remember, like, I didn't binge that day because I was just so overcome with, like, the feelings of, like, how I judged another person based on what they had in their cart, based on what their body looked like. And I spent the rest of the day just like, well, who says? And I just kind of had all these thoughts, like, who says that, like, having rounder, bigger arms is a bad thing or an ugly thing, or who says that a squishier belly is gross? And I was just having all these memories of all the things I'd heard growing up from my family, other people, and just thinking, who says all that's true? And, you know, okay, so just because I had that, like, epiphany doesn't mean that, like, oh, okay, I'm good and I'm done. I had to challenge that stuff a lot, and it really had to come from with me and seeing where I was jealous of people, or thought people were better than me, or thought I was better than the people. Really just doing a lot of really hard work around that. And so I had, you know, I did that kind of work for years. And so that was the beginning. I just want to share that story because it was really powerful to catch that kind of projection and grieve it and really feel the depth of it. And I highly recommend that if you find yourself judging yourself, if you believe that you don't do that to other people, that you probably do. Even if you don't want to believe that you do, you probably do, just because you don't live in a vacuum. So it's really, really important to keep seeing that and forgive yourself for it, for sure. Forgive yourself. Don't beat yourself up for having those feelings, because it's part of the bedrock of our neurobiology of how we see ourselves and how we see other people. And I'm just really passionate about people understanding that the work is uncoupling that. And so, fast forward, I guess, 2007 maybe, when I started doing my professional training. And this is where the bigger shift started happening, where most of you probably are now, in learning about health at every size and reading books about, liberation from believing that fat is a bad thing, and just doing all that inner emotional challenging of like, where this come from for you, and knowing the roots of it and pulling it up and seeing it everywhere you are. And that's the work. So now that we have so many more great books and people who speak on it way more eloquently than I can, but I just want to say, as a person who I know has a lot of privilege, and I speak about that more and more publicly, but certainly I've done it privately for 11 plus years. When I started learning about like the health at every size existed, or I guess 12 years that I learned about it. And learning from my clients who weren't like me, who didn't have my life experiences, I was bullied for about 3 years, like 5th, 6th, 7th grade. But they didn't bully about my weight, because that wasn't a piece of ammunition they can do with me, but it was about everything else, a lot of things in my life. So I don't know what it feels like to be bullied about weight, even though I was a little bit in my recovery for the weight I gained. But I knew that I wasn't fat, even though people said that. Because I was learning to take the power out of that word and not make it a negative, and more about, it's just a descriptor. So I don't know what it's like to not fit in a regular airplane seat, or have places where my body isn't, I don't have those experiences where my body doesn't fit. But what my job is to listen and just be a voice for people who have those experiences, if they want me to, in certain circumstances in their life, as well as just say, like, I hear you, and it's wrong, and it's such unfairness and bullcrap that you have to go through this, and how can I help you? And sometimes all that we can do for ourselves and each other is recognize that this is really wrong, and it's part of our job to get ourselves free as much as possible, so that we can be a sounding board and a comfort and an understanding, for each other, whether you share the same body size or not. It's, for me, I also try to think about, well, how can I not contribute to diet culture and fat phobia? And I try to not buy from companies who are so overt about that. Try to, if it's a food company who's got just diet culture advertising any kind of way that I've found, I don't buy from them. I don't allow participation in those kind of fat shaming conversations with my family. I'll just walk away if they don't stop, and I'm like, we're not going there, don't do it. And so if you're watching this and wondering, well, is that all? Is that enough? That's a lot of work, guys. And so keep reading, keep challenging yourselves, keep where you find yourself, whatever end of the spectrum you're on, if you find yourself feeling like that, what can, if somebody's in a thinner body and they say they understand, of course they don't fully understand. They haven't been in your experience. But what I do know is that fat phobia negatively impacts everybody, and it pulls us apart as people just being in connection with each other, which is what I'm a stand against. Is I haven't been in your experience, I'm still a stand for the fact that, like, your life isn't going to magically change if you get thinner. People are still going to, like, be crappy to you sometimes, or not understand you, or bad things unfortunately happen, and that's not necessarily having anything to do with you. I do know that it's easier to walk around the world in a smaller body, logistically, and in your even potential dating prospects and clothing, and you don't have to go to the doctor typically and deal with medical fat bias and weight bias, and all those things are real, and I'm just here to help be an advocate for you. And if you're on the thinner side of things, recognize that when you say you feel fat, I know that's real, and I know that I feel fat. I was always meaning something. I feel uncomfortable about something that you're doing, feeling, experiencing, that was coming up, but it's not the same thing. And it's not that your pain's not recognized. It's that it is different. And so, but everybody listening to this, that you deserve to know that this is part of the uncoupling work that you are doing. If you're listening to this, you're probably like, either know what I'm talking about with uncoupling, and uncoupling means uncoupling the function of needing to hate your body, the function of needing to restrict, binge, purge, diet talk, count stuff, whatever. You're in the business in your life, even though you might not call yourself in the business of it, to be free. We're all doing this. We're all doing this work of uncoupling. What is it that I'm getting from this? I know it hurts me, and I know it prevents my freedom. What am I getting from this? And it could be, it's such deep stuff that you don't even remember. So again, forgive yourself for not knowing the why. You don't even have to know the why. It's just recognizing that when you feel that way, if you can be with that, even if it takes you 10 years to do it, that's okay. It can take as long as it takes to uncouple, because sometimes, especially my clients that I know that like have used, not having needs, or and that's being hooked to food or weight in some way, since they don't even have memories of, that is going to take you some time to feel like your nervous system can be more stable without it. So don't give up on it. Find the right help to help you do that. I know that's a cornerstone of my work. The reason I added some of that work to my work, and it's woven in now for the last several years, is that we can know a lot about even diet culture and how it's like it's got tentacles in all of us, and that we're still working to pull out. Sometimes you've done a lot of that work and you get it, and you don't want to judge your body anymore, no matter what size you are, and you want to be free. It's that if you've got this bedrock of using food in some kind of way in your system, in your wiring, in your neurobiology, it's going to take you some time to build enough stability to let it go. Because it's a scary thing to let it go. Not only just being out there in the world and doing this kind of talks out there in the world online and what people think about that, and you can get free of it and walk around the world and see it and hear it and feel it all the time, but you also have your internal environment of building a more solid foundation on something that's not about avoiding the depth of who you are, and that's good work, but it takes time. So anyway, I just want to share a little bit of all that. That was a lot. It's a kind of a long thing. If you have any questions or concerns, leave it in the comments below or tag me. And I'll keep talking in depth about these kind of things whenever like the thing pops up. But I want people to know, like, you can get out of this. It's definitely a matter of learning to bring full permission back to your eating, full permission back to being who you are. Recognizing that some parts of this journey are going to be harder for you than others, but you can still do it. And knowing that this work really does require a lot of attunement to yourself, to understanding your inner wiring about this. And I didn't go do this by myself, by the way. I mean, I sound like some of my journey was a lot of self-help, but I wish I would have had help that knew better, because this was years, I was in that process of like catching myself in projections and grieving and feeling shame and just feeling shit, honestly, all the time, because I didn't know, besides journaling, really. And it's not because I didn't want help. It was because there literally, where I lived in this small area, there weren't any therapists talking about this, or the nutrition therapist I had, she took me a long way, but we didn't really talk about this wiring work, somatic work, and breaking free from diet, like overall cultural work, just because it's like we've all been still growing and learning. So we all are kind of growing and standing on the backs of the people we learn from, and growing that and growing that and growing that. So yeah, if I look back, like I wish that 7 years I was trying to figure this stuff out, I would have loved to have worked with somebody to quicken that process, to like make it a little easier, and to have mirroring, to know from somebody else what that could look like or feel like. So yeah, I'm not magical. I just suffered a lot and figured a lot out, and I also which grew my character, of course, so it wasn't all negative, but then in the last 10 years, but certainly in the last couple years of like really just pouring myself into all this, past even the Health at Every Size and liberation work, were really around like the trauma that happens from diet culture in our neurobiology, and helping people uncouple that. So that's where so much of my work is informed these days. So thanks for listening and watching. I would love to hear comments, concerns, questions, places where like I'm missing the mark, and if somebody's has an insight for me about like, hey, you still need to work on that, I am open and to listening and hearing, and I keep doing my stuff too. So thank you so much. I hope you're all doing well, and till the next time, take care. Bye.